what was that? Mr. Postman by the Beatles. My granddad used to play that song for us, right? And because I'd get up, I was like 4 or 5 dancing in this like working men's club to Mr. Postman. They used to get me up on the stage and like, I was very much into sport and athletics growing up. So I was just obsessed about training and going to train. You know what it's like when you first get singing? You listen to people and you try to sound like them, don't you? So at the start, I was doing what every typical pub singer does and was trying to sing a bit like Elvis, you know, like, oh, listen, won't fall, you know, that kind of thing. So, and I didn't really have my own voice at the time. And then all of a sudden, this guy just appears out of nowhere. Big shit house of a guy, massive head. I just remember his head. It was like massive. And he was like, turn that music off. And I'm like...
Hello and welcome to the One More Songcast. My name's Lee.
I'm Luke.
Right, Luke, we'll start today by asking how the hell are you?
How am I?
Yeah, and what you been up to?
Not a lot, to be fair. So I've not gigged since the end of Christmas because I usually like to have January off just to recharge. I say get a few songs in, but I've not even got any new songs in yet. So yeah, not a lot really, to be honest. Right. Enjoying life, watching a bit of footy. What about yourself? Nice. You've been gigging straight through, haven't you?
Yeah. I kind of had a little bit of a recharge over Christmas. So I did one gig, which obviously we discussed on the last podcast on the 30th, and then I've been at it really since the 6th or 7th. So. Yeah, I've had some pretty good ones. Luckily got a busy one at the Rose and Crown.
Surely?
Yeah.
Shout out to Dave.
Shout out to Dave. Lovely guy. Always looks after us, doesn't he? My mate Lee came on and did a solo set halfway through as well from Flash Floods.
Oh, nice.
Great band if you haven't checked him out.
Your mate Lee? So there's another Lee in your band?
There's another Lee. And his name is spelled L-E-A. Oh, hipster.
Leah?
Oh, no, it hasn't got the H on it. Don't you be mistaken. So I've had a couple of good ones.
Any funny stories from gigs? Anything that was a bit random or memorable? You know.
I did have the classic "Do Wonderwall."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was in Harwood.
Shout out to Oasis.
Yeah, shout out to Oasis for that one. Please don't sue us. I didn't do Wonderwall.
You didn't do it?
No, I told him.
You got to give the people what they want, Lee.
I did tell him, listen, that one gets asked for so many times, I'll give you Live Forever. And he went, oh yeah, that's actually my favourite song. So, no, they were really nice. They were a really nice group, actually.
Yeah. You did a gig with Chris, didn't you, who's in your band, I noticed?
Yes.
A duo. How was
that?
Yeah,
we did a duo one. It was quiet, but there was quite a few good listening people in there, and they all seemed to be enjoying it.
Would you rather have 100 dickheads all sloshing their pints and asking for Wonderwall, or would you rather have 3 attentive listeners?
Ooh, that literally depends on the night, to be honest, because the 100 dickheads. You sometimes get a heckler, and there's nothing more than I love than shutting down a heckler.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had the experience, but hecklers are great. We'll talk about that on another episode because, Luke, today's all about you. So basically what we're normally going to do is eventually we're going to have guests come on and we're going to be asking them questions about their career, how they fit into this local music malarkey, and sometimes a little bit further than that as well. But we thought we'd start by doing a couple of episodes introducing ourselves.
Yeah, because if you don't know who we are, then, it's all pretty... Is it pointless? No, it's not pointless, but, it's good to know the hosts, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Know what we've been through to get to this pinnacle.
Yeah.
Which is sat in here doing this.
Our little story. So this is going to be a theme where I'm going to be the host of the podcast and Luke is going to be our guest.
Are you effectively Michael Parkinson, Piers Morgan?
Parky, yeah. I could be Graham Norton, Jonathan Ross, anyone you want me to be. Anyway, Luke. Right. So we're talking to Luke Betts. At Luke B Sings all forms of social media, mainly Facebook and Instagram. Mainly Facebook, I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm not really into all the TikTok dances and all that, but
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am sure. Yeah.
You're not thought about it.
We'll
get into that in the next bit, Luke. But first of all, our first question is going to be asking Luke, what does music mean to you?
Ooh, okay. So, yeah, this is going to be our question for every guest, isn't it? So
Yeah,
I should
it
have put
is.
a little bit more thought into this, to be fair, because I knew what this question was. What is music to me? I think music, it sounds dead cliche this, but music's a little bit like a treasure chest or a time capsule, isn't it? So, you know, as soon as you hear a song, it can instantly like take you back to stuff, can't it? Like, and that's good, bad, you know, it's like a lot of the time it's like teenage years and having a laugh with your mates, and sometimes when you hear a song that you've not heard for years, it's like, oh my god, do you remember this one? I think like that's so powerful, isn't it? And like you can't really explain like why music does that, like nothing else really does that, does it? You know,
No.
or it doesn't to that same degree. You know, and that's what I love about music is it, you know, you'd be able to sort of dip into any sort of song at any time and it can just take you back to like great memories or emotional time, whatever it is, and you can just relive stuff through the power of that song and what you were listening to maybe at the time, or lyrics that you can relate to and that kind of thing. So
I mean, so is there any particular songs that sort of started that process and sort of influence that meaning, or is there any songs that you think of when you think of that description you've just given?
Again, it sounds cliche this, but like growing up, obviously we lived in like you know, where we're from now, Chorley and all that lot, but my mum's side of the family, you met me granddad the other week, didn't you, actually, taking some photos for our page. They're all from like Norfolk, so Great Yarmouth and all that area, and growing up my granddad like played in 60s bands and whatever else. So literally when we'd go around there for Christmas and Easter, whatever it was, there'd always be the Beatles playing. There'd always be the sounds of the 60s, whether it's the Searchers, you know, Herman's Hermit, it's all them. So growing up and listening to all that music, like it just reminds me of us like me and my brother like kicking a football in they had quite a big garden, used to play football, smashing the ball at the window and that, and like always 60s music, always the Beatles, like it always just takes me back to like proper like memorable Christmases and that kind of thing. So I'd probably say the Beatles. I know that sounds very generic, but I do love the Beatles, to be fair, because of that, really.
So the next question, funnily enough, was actually going to lead on to that. So obviously you've said the Beatles are a big influence. Were there any other influences that you think you had, like that you created yourself?
Way back when?
Way back when, yeah.
It's funny because everybody's into music, aren't they, to some degree, but back then I wasn't really that interested in music. I think it was more subconscious, really, because of what like I'd be exposed to as a kid, listening to my granddad playing these bands, and a lot of the time it wouldn't be songs that I'd know or really remember, but as soon as you'd hear them, it would just trigger their memories. So it was a lot of 60s stuff, to be fair, a lot of Elvis, a lot of like what was that, Mr. Postman by the Beatles. My granddad used to play that song for us, right? And because I'd get up, I was like 4 or 5, dancing in this like working men's club to Mr. Postman. They used to get me up on the stage and like, so I always remember like stuff like that. It's weird, but yeah, a lot back then it was all 60s and 50s really. And then besides from that, so I grew up like late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know, it was I wasn't really that into like mainstream music. I just remember like your typical like pop idol musicians and that kind of thing. But as I say, I weren't really into music back then, so I didn't really cling on to many artists. So not that I can remember anyway.
Right, okay.
Way back when, yeah.
So when it came to getting started, what sort of age were you?
Yes.
When you actually did really think, do you know what, this music malarkey's for me. I want to get involved in some of that band.
Yeah, it's weird really, because so if you don't know me or whatever, I was very much into sport and athletics growing up. So everything, it's unpaid athletics. It's very amateur sport unless you're very at the top. But I always wanted to be a runner, but that didn't really mean a lot because it's not really a career path.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, like I was just obsessed about training and going to train. I never massively went to like your house parties at school and that because I was always training on a Tuesday night or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So where am I going with this? What was your question? So how did I get into music? Right. Yeah. So that was always my obsession. And I enjoyed listening to music, but it was only really until I went to America on a scholarship for athletics. So they sort of paid for you to be out there and study and compete for the uni. It was pretty boring, like, because obviously you train at like 5 a.m. because it was so hot out there. And then I'd get home and I'd not really have anything to do and that. So Again, I was listening to a lot of 50s and 60s stuff, and I was going through like the back catalogue of like Beatles albums from the very start and like going through every song. And then I went to like a local like guitar shop near there because I was that bored of like playing FIFA and whatever else. I just thought, oh, I'll just pick up a guitar and have a mess about, see what I can find on YouTube and that, and see if I can learn a song or two. Didn't really know that I could sing or whatever else. And it wasn't until I got back that I had guitar lessons. I still have guitar lessons with him now, actually. He's called Justin Crow. That's his name. Justin Crow. He plays at the Cavern and whatever else. I had a few guitar lessons with him, and I just recorded myself at home singing, and I think it was Stuck in the Middle by Steelers Wheels I did. And I sent it to my granddad, who's obviously been in bands and stuff, and he was like, is that you singing on that? And I was like, I've listened back to this clip, by the way. It's awful. Like, when you listen back to stuff.
Yeah.
He was like, is that you singing on that? I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, right, well, why don't you... Because he was in a band at the time, a local band. He's like, come down and like have a practice with us, and whatever else. So we went to a studio very much similar, like a rehearsal space like this. And I sang a few songs and whatever else. Didn't really think much of it. Didn't really have any... Because I'm very naive at the start. I still am now, to be fair, because I've only been doing it 4 or 5 years, but didn't have any concept of key or anything. He was like, oh, try this song, and it was like in a female key. And I'm like trying to sing it up there. And it's like, but I thought, oh, that was a bit rubbish. Never really carried on with it. And then he said, oh, well, you're a pretty good voice. Come and join the band and whatever else. So... Long story short, because I don't want to natter on too much, I started singing in this band. The band eventually folded for various reasons, people doing other bits and bats. The girl in our band went and sang. She didn't sing, she worked on cruise ships with a nursing job. And then I thought, well, how do I carry on doing this, because I really enjoyed the buzz of playing and singing in a band and whatever else. So that's where I am sort of now, really. Yeah.
So how have your influences changed, and what would you say was then influencing you once you actually started to go out on your own? What then changed in your influences? What was it that you thought, right, I need to find some covers? What was actually inspiring you to get out?
So I think not the restriction of being in this band, because you got to remember, like, this was my first experience of music, so I was very naive. I didn't play an instrument, I just sang. And you know what it's like when you first get singing? You listen to people and you try to sound like them, don't you? So at the start, I was doing what every typical pub singer does and was trying to sing a bit like Elvis, oh, listen, won't fall, that kind of thing. So, and I didn't really have my own voice at the time. And so it was like... And also, when you're in a band, there's 5 or 6 of you, aren't there? And they put their ideas in, and they aren't always necessarily what you like. So as I was in this band, I was thinking to myself, oh, well, I'd like to do this song and I'd like to do that song. But the band was saying, nah, it wouldn't really work for what we're doing, because they wanted to be a bit more of a party band. So then it got me thinking about, well, how do I... when I go and do it on my own, I've got free reign to do whatever I want, basically. But then you've also got to learn how to please an audience as well, haven't you? So it's that fine balance between doing stuff that you love and stuff that's popular on a Friday, Saturday night in a local pub. So that was the tricky part. So for me, I like a lot of early 2000s indie stuff. I like a lot of 90s stuff like The Verve, Travis are always ones that I love, that kind of thing. And they started to grow on me, really, like as I sort of... I've started to get into music a little bit more, really. Yeah. Right,
okay. So, obviously, you said about the crowds. Working a crowd and how to please a crowd.
Yeah.
What were the other challenges that you really faced? Obviously, again, you've mentioned only being able to sing, not really being able to play guitar at that point when you were starting out. So, what were some of the challenges that you were coming across in terms of getting started?
So getting started just on my own?
Yeah.
So I was very much protected in a band in the sense that I was naive, but I had experienced people with sound and people that could obviously play instruments. Then when I sort of went into singing on my own, it was a bit of a shock at the start, because I couldn't play guitar at all. I'm 25, I've only been doing it a year. I can sing to a decent level. So the shock was obviously going out and singing to backing tracks, which I have a sort of an opinion on now, but I'm still using them a little bit. But at the time, I had this stigma, and because I have a little bit of imposter syndrome as well, because I've only been doing it for a short time and I'm quite inexperienced, I had a bit of like, oh God, they're going to hate me because I'm singing to backing tracks kind of thing, because I didn't know how to play guitar then. I was going from singing in a band to singing in a pub to backing tracks, which I'll be honest, at the start, I didn't particularly enjoy either, because there's no sort of manoeuvring structure of a song, or you're just singing to a track, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I felt a little bit self-conscious about that, from being in a band and sort of, you know, dancing around with people and having a bit of fun, to being on your own, singing to a track. It felt a little bit like glorified karaoke, but I felt so far like away from being able to play an instrument. That was tricky at the start, because I felt like I was doing gigs, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do in the long run, was singing to backing tracks, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I had to find a way basically to learn acoustic guitar as best I could, and try and implement those songs slowly in.
Yeah.
So that was tricky at the start. And to be fair, I do leave a few in now, just, you know, when it is a rowdy night. Sometimes people appreciate a fuller sound, don't they, towards the end of the night. But that was the tricky part. Imposter syndrome at the start, I think. Just struggling with being a bit self-conscious about singing to backing tracks, because we've discussed this before, haven't we, about, you know, forums online and that kind of thing. And I had in my head that the typical musician, you know, would be watching me and thinking, what is this idiot doing here singing to backing tracks on his own? It doesn't really feel like very rock and roll, does it?
No.
You get what I mean? So I had to really work hard at that, and that was the initial challenge, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that imposter syndrome still affect you at every gig you go into? Or does it sort of only happen?
No, I still struggle with that. I'd like to think I'm at the stage now where I feel like, not in a cocky way, but I'm established enough with like venues and that, where people always sort of want me back, and I feel like I'm at a decent level of singing now, and a decent level at you know, acoustic rhythm guitar playing. So I feel like I'm at a level now where I feel like I'm doing all right, but it still always hangs over me when I do a gig, because I've only been doing it for such a short time. I'll get up there and I'm just about to start, and I'm like, what on earth are you doing up here? Like, you've not done it your whole life. You've done sport and whatever else and thing, and like, why do you almost deserve to be doing this? When I bump into the likes of maybe you and loads of other people that have literally, it's been your life since as long as you can remember, and I'm just coming into this world and kind of stepping on people's toes almost. You get what I mean? It's a tricky one, and it does. I always get ridiculously nervous. I'm very self-critical still, but maybe that's not a bad thing, you know. I don't know.
No, I think there's personally, you know, there'll be times where I've had that, certainly. I think particularly when you're still, I know 5 years sounds like a long time, and you are established by then. I think that probably is more common than you realise.
Yeah.
You know, even the most cocky, confident guy that owns a stage will still be suffering with that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Even if it's just because they're performing on a bigger stage for one day and they're headlining it, or, you know, that does come into it. So you're not alone there, Luke. But how does that affect you going into daily life? Is that sort of more, has it developed into an anxiety? Is it just sort of stuck with performing and playing your music out in pubs and stuff like that?
It's difficult. I think I've always, like, I'm not saying I've like got mental health issues or anxiety sufferer, but I always like worry about the next thing coming up. So like with my athletics, it was always like the pain of training that night or the pain of a race, because you know it's coming.
Yeah.
And I get that. So I finished my gig on Saturday. Sunday I'm all right. Monday I'm all right. But then the cycle comes back round again. Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh, have I got my songs ready? You know, have I added a couple of new ones in? Oh, you know, is my set going to be right for this gig that I'm doing? It all builds and builds and builds and builds. And then you get to Friday, nervous. You know, you might make a couple of mistakes, and then Saturday's a little bit easier because you've had Friday. Then you're all right Sunday, and then it goes again. And I feel like that never gets easy. I'm always like, so it's like, obviously I've not gigged for like 4 or 5 weeks, so this anxiety is building up now, ready for the next one on Friday.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then never ever is bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had some bad experiences in that initial phase, some stuff that haunts me now, but I'm still here, like, and it's not anywhere near as bad as what you think once you get going, but you just feel like everyone's going to hate what you're doing, or someone's going to kick you out or pay you off, but you've got to have I know I'm doing all right, but I think a lot of the time it's hard to explain. I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand it. So you generally sort of get over it after the gig, and, oh, that's not so bad, and then it works itself towards the next one, because generally, once you get off stage, all you're focused on is getting the gear packed down.
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
You live off it maybe that night, you
Yeah.
sleep, and then it's right,
Yeah.
okay, whatever you're doing that
Yeah.
day, isn't it?
We want this to be honest, don't we? And I think what I want to get to a place where when I finish a gig, it's not relief. It's more like, oh, I've enjoyed every minute of that. Rather than it's like, oh, I can breathe again now. On to the next one.
Yeah,
And you're not actually, I am enjoying it. Like, people always say to me, like, oh, you look like you're having so much fun. You're always smiling, but it's more like a relief at the end of it. And I think that's just because I've not done it my whole life and I still feel like a bit of an imposter.
Yeah, I can completely understand where you're coming from. I think especially when you're really trying to establish yourself, you've got yourself established in a few venues, but then you're trying to grow your venue status.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still probably struggling in that sense in a different way, which we'll talk about when it comes to me. So, you know, those challenges have sort of manifested themselves in different ways now, and it's sort of you're like the next stage. So, recently we've been talking about you potentially doing an original song, and you've got a pretty good idea for a chorus.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something you're thinking about getting involved in terms of getting into your sets now, or is it something that you think you'll ever be doing, or do you think you're going to be sticking with the covers?
Yeah,
live?
it's tricky, isn't it? I think it's worth mentioning, like, so, and it's probably the same for you as well. You have these like goals, and you go. So when I first started singing, it was like, oh, if I could ever like perform in front of like an audience, that would be like the dream for me. And then you do that, and it's like, oh, if I could ever do a full set of acoustic guitar in front of someone, that would be the dream for me. Then you do that, and it's like the goalposts always get moved, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I enjoy singing covers. I enjoy like having control to a degree over like what covers I do and some of my influences. But like my next dream or goal would be to like actually like, and I have had a little go with it. Obviously, you've listened to bits and bats that I've done, because when I very first started out, I tried to write a bit of that, but I had no knowledge of guitar. I was just singing melodies in the shower and then like getting someone to do, which is kind of similar to what I've done with you. But because I obviously gig now, I understand the guitar a little bit more. I understand things vocally. I understand keys and whatever else. I feel like I'm in a better position now where I can write stuff that's actually like a bit meaningful and with a bit of structure and something that's decent, you know. So that is the next goal for me, is to actually, you know, write a song, get it properly recorded. I think the tricky thing is, and you might agree with this as well, is, and you mentioned like people locally that do actually integrate original songs into cover sets, but it's not always the done thing, is it? Because people on a Friday and Saturday night are out there to hear songs that they know and love, and when you stick an original song in there, no matter how good it is, people, and this is no disrespect to like audiences, but if they don't know it, they can just switch off like that, can't they? So it's finding that. So I would love to get something recorded and like show it to people and get it out on social media. In terms of integrating that into sets, I think that's then a whole different world almost, and you'd have to learn how to get that in. What's your experience with, because obviously you've written some good stuff. Have you ever integrated that into?
I've started to, because I think you get to a certain place where you played a venue a few times. I generally don't the first couple of times I've played a venue. If I get invited back a couple more times, and that's when I sort of start to integrate it, because if people like what you do anyway, you've already got them engaged. Now, if you then say, "Oh, this is my original tune," their ears perk. Because you've done what you've done before.
I see.
Some people will switch off for that song, but it only takes a hit song.
You know what it's like as well. You can go to some places and it doesn't necessarily mean people aren't enjoying what you're doing, but they don't necessarily clap at the end of your songs. Whereas you can go to other venues and they're attentively listening and you get a big clap at, and maybe is that a time to put an original one in when you've got their full attention and the rest?
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got to read your room. And how do you find that? How are you finding the sort of... Hello there, it's Lee from the One More Songcast. Sorry to interrupt your episode today. However, this is a public service announcement. So, we need as many of you as possible to follow us on social media, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook at TomsCast1. This gives you the opportunity to see the best highlights from our episodes. So the games we do, the chats with guests, we'll be clipping up bits and putting them on there for you guys to see and keep up to date with each episode. So, follow us on that. If you do have any suggestions, either get them in the comments of the videos on those platforms or email us at tomscastmusic@gmail.com. Also, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast, and rate and review it on the podcast platforms that you're listening to. Thank you very much for listening, all one of you. See you soon. Hello, and welcome back to the One More Songcast.
We've changed clothes, Lee.
We have changed clothes. Well, it was getting a bit sweaty and the stench in the room wasn't comfortable, so we had to go home and shower. The fact was, we actually discovered a setting on your camera, didn't we? It was like, we limited us to 30 minutes, and then we had run out of time to re-record an episode.
We were blabbing on for an hour, went back to the camera, and missed about half an hour's worth, haven't we? So we said, we'll do it another day. So what's happened since, Lee? We've had the transfer window. What do you think of United's new signing, Mike Hunt?
All right. Well, I haven't heard much about him, to be honest.
He's not meant to be the nicest of guys.
Yeah, no, he seems that he can be a bit wet and dry. You know what I mean? Sometimes a bit tight. Maybe on a night out.
It's not bad. We need tightening up in the midfield. So it's welcomed. Anyway, back to the episode, Lee. Where were we?
Yeah. So we got to the point where we were discussing knocking original tunes into your set. So eventually you said that might be something you look at. But I mentioned about being able to read a room. I mean, how have you found the challenge of being able to read a room? So you're in there, you're playing a song, you're getting the feeling it's not quite working for this audience. At what point do you go, right, I need to switch up?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I think obviously the more experience you get, the bigger your set list becomes, which is good. But I think also having a broad taste of music as well is good. So obviously we were talking before about loving 60s music and whatever else. If you can get 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s and a little bit of whatever rubbish is out today, then you're winning, aren't you, really? I think it's a fine balance between sort of making sure that the bar owner or the person that's booked you for the wedding knows what you're about before you go into the gig, which always helps. Because if they've seen you before and they go, oh, well, just do what you normally do, then that's a blessing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you turn up, then I think, you just need to understand, say, a couple don't go quite right. I usually have, like, alternatives down the side. So I'll have my general set list, and then it's like, well, if I've got a few backup ones that could work depending on the audience, it might be a really dancey 80s song or a dancey 60s song. I can substitute that in, you know. So
yeah.
What do you tend to do?
I tend to have a song that I'm going to try out. So I have a list of probably about 50 songs.
Yeah.
And in a particular venue, I generally get an idea about the venue from either watching videos, asking them what the audience tend to like.
Yeah.
I've done that less. I've sort of gone more down the route of, sorry, you're getting what you're getting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll never plan a set list. So I'll just go, right, okay, well, that one didn't work. Let's go back to what did work.
Yeah.
So if it might be indie and I switch to an older song, if I keep it within the theme of like the Monkees or the Beatles, it's likely to transfer over, and then I'll hit them with a bit of, I don't know, something like Lionel Richie or something like that.
Yeah.
But I never tend to have a problem.
Yeah.
There's just, like we were talking earlier, there tends to be venues where it is more just they're going to sit there quietly listening, but not really interact or get involved. So you just do what you do most of the time, and the other time, sometimes you might just cut a song short, go straight into something else. So
I sometimes have a little book on the floor where I've got, because a lot of the times I've forgotten like really good songs that I do, and it's like, oh, why didn't I put that one in? Because I've just, in that moment, I've just forgotten. So I tend to have a little book with a list of songs on it and that kind of thing.
I think there's also that fact. Do you ever get it where you get a song requested that you know you haven't played in ages, and you're like, yeah, that's a banger.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I used to have fun playing that and just chuck it in anyway.
Yeah. I have a mini breakdown when that happens. If I've not done it for a while, I have to mute my front of house, turn around and go through the chords quickly. Right, I think I've got it. Right, go on then. You know, like that kind of thing.
Do you know what? I tend to just blag it now. If sometimes there's times where you get a bit ropey on the lyrics, do you ever just have your lyrics out of interest?
Yeah, so I have on my mic stand, I attach an iPad. 9 times out of 10 I don't have to look at it, but say you put a new one in or whatever, it's always just good to have the lyrics there on a thing.
Yeah.
And I colour the lyrics in, so verses are usually red, chorus, because you know when you in a split second you look down and if it's all in the same colour, you're kind of like, oh, where? So I kind of do it that I colour code it a little bit.
Right. Okay. I tend to leave a gap.
Okay.
So I'll do it in either 4 to 8 line sections. If it's an easy verse and the lines are relatively short, and I can do it in 8 lines, just so I know there's a gap between those words.
Yeah.
Whatever, I do it like that. I've said this to Chris. It's just sort of, he doesn't like having the lyrics there because it looks a bit karaoke.
I get what you mean. What you mean. As long as you're not like fixated on it.
Yeah.
I think it's just people don't even notice it's there. Just have a little glance down. But
yeah.
I'm talking about the 1 or 2. You know what it's like. The songs that we do, like we're doing every week anyway. So
yeah, I think it is generally ingrained in your memory, and it's just when you've not necessarily. You might have done a lot of jobs through the week. You might have had a lot of gigs on.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need to put the guitar down.
Yeah.
Right. So the next question I was going to ask. So we were talking about challenges. Reading the Room was part of that. So how do you find those challenges have actually changed since you've been? Well, now you're 4 or 5 years in. Have you still got a lot of the same challenges, like the imposter syndrome, or even? Do you think things like learning certain chords, playing certain songs are still harder? You've still got some of the challenges that you were struggling on guitar, or?
Yeah, so I think those challenges have changed in the sense that I've definitely not got that sort of like subconscious like fear that I'm a backing track singer and people are going to think it's karaoke, because I kind of have started to convert to mainly acoustic guitar now. I think I'm now at the level where I'd like to be a better guitarist and maybe throw in the odd like riff or little rundown in between chords and that kind of thing. So sometimes I feel like, oh, is a guitarist sat in the audience watching me? And now they're thinking, God, he's playing the most basic like strumming patterns, and it just, and then I might get to a better level. Like it's just, but yeah, I'm not as bad with that. I think I used to have a real issue with people going, oh, Luke B sings on tonight. He's a vocalist and a guitar player, and I'd be like, I'm not sure about you putting the guitar player part in. But now I'm just like, well, yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah,
so it's all right, you know.
Do you know what? Go back to that guitarist point, because do you know when a guitarist is in the room?
I've got a feeling. I've got a feeling when there's a musician in the room. Yeah.
What is it that gives you that feeling?
They're just kind of like intensely watching you, I always find.
Yeah, you get the stare at your left hand and they're like looking for the chords.
Yeah.
And you don't know whether they're a guitarist like going, what the hell is that chord?
No, they won't do that with me.
Beautiful. Or they're like, oh, what's he doing there? Let's watch out.
You just feel like they're picking you apart. They're picking you apart a little bit.
Yeah.
I always feel as well, this is proper like what's the word I'm looking for? Stereotypical. But I always feel like there's people that look like musicians as well, and you just think they look a bit musical, and they might not always be, but they might dress a little bit quirky or something about them.
Yeah, musicians, like you can pick one out from a mile off.
Tell you what though, the happiest I feel at the end of a gig, you know, my dad can tell me it went well. I take that with a pinch of salt. No disrespect, Dad. My mates can say it went really well. But when somebody goes, oh, I play in a band or I do this and I really enjoyed what you did tonight, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
Have you ever seen that meme? The biggest compliment a musician can give a musician is... Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I have.
Because have you ever had that face at a gig?
Yeah.
I've had it a couple of times, and you know they're a musician. Then you're like, get in. No, I think that is like belting. I think. Have you ever had Have you done many gigs where there's a sound engineer as well?
Yeah, I actually sort of know because I used to do Exton Beer Festival, and he actually did the sound for me at the thing, and he goes to the Talbot quite a lot in Exton, which is directly next to where this festival was, and he every time I go, I've got a new piece of gear or something, and he's always like, oh, what have you got? Have you upgraded to a digital mixing desk yet? Oh, you've got these speakers, I see, blah blah blah. But he doesn't necessarily help me with the sound on the night, but I'll go, oh, if you spot anything, will you just maybe tell me, Dad, or come and tweak, you can tweak something on my desk if you like. So that's quite nice to have, but they don't generally mess with it, do they? They'll go, oh yeah, no worries, and then just go, that's fine, and you think, is it definitely fine, or are you just saying it's fine?
Well, we've got one, I don't know if you know DJ Pants, he does a lot around Longridge and stuff like that, but he's done sound for flash floods a couple of times. When we've done weddings and things like that. And going back to the compliments point, we do James Laid, and I always do the high bit. I always do the high bit in that, and he goes, do you know that vocal? It just reminds me of John Frusciante. I'm like, come on now, steady on, like, no one's like John Frusciante. I'm not even getting close to playing guitar like the guy, let alone singing like him. The guy can do anything, but that's probably the biggest compliment I've ever had from any other musician. So you've had the challenges playing guitar. Are you at the stage, obviously, you're more comfortable being called a guitarist? Are you at the stage where you're calling yourself a guitarist, or are you just calling yourself a 3-chord master sort of thing?
I'm definitely... What do you call them? Just like acoustic performer is kind of a thing, because when I think of acoustic performers, I'm not necessarily thinking of these big solos. I'm just thinking of a vocalist and a bit of acoustic accompaniment, I suppose. And that's kind of what I'm striving for and what I kind of feel like I'm getting to. I wouldn't say I'm a 3-chord master. I can play decent chords, but it's I'm more comfortable with being called an acoustic performer. You know how people sell themselves as acoustic performers. I'm fairly comfortable with that at this stage. Of course, there's always development, and when you've been doing it for as little time as I have, then there's going to be massive development over these next few years. But I'm definitely at a more comfortable place with that, I'd say.
Super. So, Luke, coming on to the final question, what's next? Obviously, we've discussed a few things on this, but what is I would say normally what's your 5-year plan, but it doesn't have to be a 5-year plan. What can we expect to see from you over the next period of time?
So I feel like over the last 5 years, I've had a steady progression in terms of like bookings, contacts, people sort of, like rebooking me and that kind of thing. Of course, when I sort of started out as well, like COVID hit in the middle of that. So if you remember that time when all of our gigs just got completely scrapped overnight, so that was difficult building back up. But then as soon as I have built back up, I'm in a nice place now where I'm sort of booked up. I'm not having to, and this might change, but I'm not having to approach many venues. People sort of come to me, which is really nice. So I'm in a good place with that. When we're talking about writing a few songs and whatever else, that would be a nice place to get to. And if I could get a song out on social media and maybe build towards that, I think that would be fantastic as well. That's something I'm looking at. Improving on guitar is a big one as well, of course. Getting to a place, I feel like I'm more happier when I'm progressing on the guitar and I'm playing acoustic songs. So that's, at least I know where I want to get to. And then there is something else. I'm sort of moving into a different remit in terms of like, so I'm obviously doing my pubs, my weddings and that kind of thing, but I was approached over Christmas to do something a little bit different, but I can't announce basically what that is yet. But you know what it is, don't you? It's a different...
Yeah, we've discussed this before. Yeah. So obviously you've got an original song in the making. The chorus idea sounds absolutely brilliant. Very much in the style of like Richard Ashcroft, and obviously we've discussed influences a little bit in that time. Who would you say now has that influence changed? Who would you say now is your biggest influence?
Well, I don't think any current music is changing me particularly, other than maybe your Jerry Cinnamons, Jamie Webster's, them kind of people. But I'm not particularly inspired to make music like that. For me, as the years have gone by, it is like I have like 3 artists that I'm really inspired by. I'd say Paolo Nutini being a massive one for me. Yeah. If you don't know much, but you will know who Paolo Nutini is.
Yeah, of course.
Vocally, he's just unbelievable. He's got such a rasp and such a like a rawness to his voice.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like I in any way copy that or try to be like that, but I like to have a bit of edge in my voice.
Yeah.
And that. And he's very poetic in the way that he writes his songs as well. So he's a big one. He's probably my number one, I'd say. And then there's Travis. I really love Travis as a band from the 90s, the Scottish band. A lot of their sort of guitar influences and stuff like that I really like. It's very like atmospheric. How do you explain what Travis are like? They are quite atmospheric, kind of like spacey, aren't they? In the way that they. And then there's Richard Ashcroft, of course. Again, just like pretty simple lyrics, but they really impactful, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I think Ashcroft is one of those things. Everything's from the soul.
Yeah, it is.
So, right, Luke, what I've come to at the moment. Last one before we go on to that. What would you say your most memorable gig story is?
Okay. Oh God, there's always one that pops to mind with this, but I feel like it could be a bit incriminating. Are we going forward with it?
I think we should, because I want to give our listeners a laugh. And, I happen to have heard the story that I think it is. I happen to have heard it before.
Yeah.
But you know, if you want to add two, maybe like a positive one as well to balance it all out.
I think a positive one should spring to mind, shouldn't it? Like, everyone went crazy for this gig, but no, it was in my early days when I was getting a lot of gigs out towards Blackpool Way and Lytham Way. That's because that's where the band that I was in operated, so I kind of got a few contacts from there, and I was playing this like outdoor. They had a big like outdoor seating area, so it was playing out to the street and to the Weatherspoons across from it as well. So they were all being able to get free music basically for them. So I'm singing away, everyone's enjoying it. It's a nice sunny day, but there's houses sort of down this street as well, or just off the street. So I'm playing away. My family are there watching me, a few friends, and then all of a sudden this guy just appears out of nowhere. Big shit house of a guy, massive head. I just remember his head. It was like massive. And he was like, turn that music off. And I'm sort of like playing the guitar and singing a bit, so I can't really sort of go, I'm singing, mate. And he's like, turn it off. And then he starts to approach me, and I'm like, fucking hell, what's going on here? And he like goes to either grab my laptop or grab my guitar. I can't remember what he did. But basically, a member of my family thought that he'd like attacked me or something, because everyone like turned around because this guy's just like bellowing at me. So somebody in my family comes along thinking that he'd like, assaulted me or something. And he thinks it's a big hostile situation. I suppose these days as well, somebody could have a knife, they could have whatever. So he comes over and he just cracks him on the back of the head, this guy. And he's like, get out, cracks him. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Everyone piles in and, tries to get this guy away and whatever else, and he disappears. And I'm just like, what on earth just happened there? I think the person that did that was obviously just trying to protect me in the heat of the moment, and nothing came of it, or anything like that. But and then I picked my guitar up to carry on the rest of the set, and my hands were shaking, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm gonna have to have a break for a bit. And everyone's like, oh no, it's fine, don't worry, I understand. and then I'm just half expecting this guy to come back with like a weapon or something. So the whole gig I'm playing these songs, I'm forgetting chords and everything else, because I'm sort of like watching out, like waiting for this guy to come back. Like, but yeah, I just remember that moment and thinking, like, is this actually what I want to do? Like, this is only the start of it. Like, imagine when I'm getting into these rowdy pubs and whatever else. But thankfully, that's probably been one of the worst moments. Do you remember that video of that guy at the Cavern Club? My guitar teacher knows him. And he was just playing a song on the stage at the Cavern Club, and he'd obviously had an altercation with somebody before the gig or something, and he comes around the side, doesn't he, and just rugby tackles him. And like,
he was playing Sweet Caroline, wasn't he?
Yeah. And every time I watch that video, it sends this sense of dread over me, because that could happen to any of us at any time. If we have a bit of a set to with somebody, like, and they could just come up and bottle us, they could stab us.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And I think that moment just stands out to me as like, wow, what we really are unprotected and we're exposed really with what we do, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, to be fair.
But yeah, that always stands out as a biggest gig memory.
Perfect. That is a great one. That is a great first gig story. We are going to do another episode on funny gig moments.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, right, we're going to do a quick fire questions round. So, first of all, Luke, in fact, we'll do it this or that first of all. So, Coke or Pepsi?
Ooh, Coke.
Acoustic or electric?
It's got to be acoustic. I can't play electric.
Ballad or anthem?
Anthem.
Lennon or McCartney?
McCartney.
Cardio or weights?
I'm a big guy, so cardio, absolutely.
Batman or Superman?
Not really a massive fan of either, to be honest. More of a Spider-Man, but we'll go Superman.
Fair enough. Pizza or burger?
Burger.
Burger. Ooh. Club football or international football?
Well, I'm a big advocate for... I can't stand international football. Even when it's the World Cup, everyone's enjoying it, and I'm just like, I want Newcastle United or whatever it is. Newcastle versus United.
Yeah.
So club football, yeah.
Family Guy or South Park?
It's got to be South Park.
Noel Gallagher or Richard Ashcroft?
Richard Ashcroft, 100%.
Richard Ashcroft. Okay. So, right, there's a couple more questions. Okay. So,
I am conscious that we're on that 30-minute time limit again.
Yeah, so very quickly. So, wow, he's gone. We've got one here. So, what would you say to a 16-year-old Luke just starting out?
Oh, yeah.
In life?
In life, yeah. So, I'd probably give myself a shake and try and get him to play an instrument or sing or something, because as I said, I started at 25. Well, if I'd have started at 16, half of these anxieties going into a gig probably wouldn't be there because I'd been gigging for 10 years. But I also blame the curriculum a little bit, and you'll have a different opinion on this, and things will have changed as well, but music was so boring at school, at high school. You just learn about bloody time signatures and treble clefs, and there was no and I always felt like the person that did have the guitar lessons at school and that it was never really celebrated as being cool, or it was just, music was just rubbish at school basically, and there was no incentive for me to actually pick up an instrument at school.
I suppose it depends on the school. There's different elements to that, but we'll come on to that in another
but subject, basically, I'd give myself a shake and get into music. But when you don't know that you've got a talent per se, it's hard to discover that, isn't it? So
it certainly is.
I can't blame myself too much.
Also, what advice would you give to someone who's considering getting into live music?
I mean, I'd just say, obviously, you've got to have the right gear to do these gigs, but you can get started on small basic equipment, can't you? What advice would I give? I would just say, basically preparation is key. So the more nervous you are about doing it, the more you prepare, the better it will go. And I know that sounds so obvious, but you've got to the more practice you put in and whatever else, the less anxiety you'll get when you start up, and that'll hopefully keep you in it, if that makes sense. Yeah,
so just be well practiced is what you're sort of saying.
And also I think you see a lot of people starting out, and they can sing great, they can play their instrument great, but they haven't got much of a personality. They don't engage with the audience. I think that's massive. If you look like you're enjoying yourself, 9 times out of 10 the audience will enjoy what you're doing as well. So practice, just speaking to people, even speaking in front of a camera has been difficult for starters, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it certainly has.
That's a big one as well. Create a little bit of rapport with an audience when you're first getting started. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, one local artist you'd recommend?
Ooh. What, besides you and Chris Healy?
You could recommend either of us.
No, to be fair, I don't know if he's local. He's more Bury area. I quite like. He's called Acoustic. He's a really nice guy. Always open to, a bit like yourself. He'll always be there to give you tips and whatever else. And yeah, he does a really good job at being an acoustic performer. So if I was to recommend somebody for stuff like, stuff that we do, he's just an acoustic player. I think he's pretty good, and he's got a nice range of songs in his sets as well, and seems to go down well everywhere he goes. So
perfect. Right. Well, thank you very much, Luke, for being our personal guest.
No worries.
In-house resident guest. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on social media. So on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, it's at TomsCast1. And YouTube, like, subscribe, follow, and just share this out with your mates. If you've got any ideas for the pod, just get in touch at tomscastmusic@gmail.com. I've been Lee.
I've been Luke.
We'll see you soon.
Cheers, thank you.